They say loyalty ends at the gate, but some bonds are forged where rules can't reach. Tonight's story follows Sasha Peterson, a decorated officer cast out of the military without warning, her career erased and her future uncertain. With everything on the line, Sasha faces betrayal, hidden enemies, and an impossible choice, only to discover that courage isn't about a badge or a title, but about who stands beside you when the world turns its back. Are you ready to find out what really happens when one soldier refuses to be forgotten? Drop a comment letting us know your hometown and hit subscribe, because you won't want to miss what's coming next for our heroes. Sasha Peterson never slept in, not once in 20 years, not even when she was stationed in places where sunrise meant gunfire, and every dream was a fragment of memory best left untouched. Old habits are hard to break, especially for a soldier whose discipline wasn't drilled in but welded onto her bones by time, loss, and sheer stubborn pride. Her phone's silent alarm buzzed at 500, and she was already awake, eyes fixed on the cracked plaster above her bunk, counting off the seconds before she let herself move. She rolled from bed in a single practiced motion, bare feet landing softly on the cold concrete. She took a deep breath, pressing her palm to her heart, something she'd done every morning since her first deployment, a private ritual that nobody else knew about. Her room was plain, sparsely decorated even after years at Fort Liberty, save for a faded photograph of her old squad taped to the mirror and a single medal in a cheap wooden box beside her sink. Some of the other officers, the ones who'd barely tasted sand or fear, liked to joke about her being all business, no fluff. Sasha never corrected them. Let them think what they want, she thought. They didn't know the weight that came with the uniform or the stories buried behind each scar. Her joints ached as she stretched, old injuries flaring for just a moment before subsiding. She pulled on her PT gear, laced her shoes, and tied her hair back into a tight bun. The routine was more than just habit. It was armor, a layer of certainty against the chaos she'd seen, both overseas and at home. Every morning run was a chance to sort through the dreams and nightmares, to remind herself she was still here, still fighting for something, even if she wasn't sure what that was anymore. But there was a difference this morning, subtle but insistent, a tension she felt beneath her skin, an itch at the edge of her senses. Sasha's instincts were rarely wrong, and they hummed quietly now as she double-checked her gear, just as she had on every morning that mattered. The barracks were quiet as she slipped outside, nodding to a bleary-eyed private on fire watch. Nobody saluted at this hour, not unless they wanted to be chewed out for waking the whole floor. Sasha jogged across the lot, feet pounding a rhythm as familiar as her own heartbeat, every breath sharp and steady. She passed a row of empty Humvees, the engine of one still ticking as its driver stowed equipment for an early convoy. She made note of it, just as she always did, an old habit of taking in every detail, every shift in routine. She looped the perimeter, moving with a soldier's economy, not for speed but for endurance. She knew every inch of the fence line, every camera and blind spot, every place a person could hide or escape. 20 years of walking base perimeters around the world, and they all blurred together. The same chain-link fences, the same gravel crunching underfoot, the same flags snapping against the morning. Fort Liberty was no different, just another home she'd be ordered to leave someday. She just hadn't expected that day to come so soon. As Sasha rounded the last stretch, sweat prickling along her brow, she caught a glimpse of her reflection in a mess hall window. She paused, caught by the sharpness in her own eyes. Gray, unyielding, the kind of gaze that made new recruits stammer and old soldiers nod with respect. She looked older than she felt, lines etched deep by sun and worry, but her posture never faltered. Sasha Peterson. Major, intelligence officer, career soldier, and, according to some, the one you wanted at your side when things went wrong. Back in her room, Sasha showered quickly, the hot water a rare indulgence. She dried off, pulled on her uniform with the practiced precision of someone who'd done it 1,000 times. Each button, each crease, each polished insignia was placed perfectly, The rack of ribbons on her chest told a story of deployments, of medals won and lost, of friends who never came home. She ran her thumb over her name patch. Peterson, straightened her collar, and glanced at the clock. 6:20. Still early. Still enough time to review the morning brief before her team arrived. She poured herself a mug of bitter coffee, black and scalding, and sat at the battered desk in her corner. A stack of files awaited her, most flagged for further review. Encrypted emails, intelligence updates from overseas, a handful of reports she'd highlighted last night after something in the wording set off quiet alarms. She read quickly, efficiently, her mind tracing connections and patterns. The numbers didn't add up, and that bothered her. There was always a story behind the numbers, and Sasha's job, her calling, was to find it before anyone else did. A knock sounded at the door, brisk and polite. Sasha glanced up, irritation flaring. She wasn't due in until 700, and nobody came by unannounced. She opened the door to find Lieutenant Adam Brooks standing stiffly in the hallway, dark circles under his eyes, uniform rumpled, as though he'd slept in it. "Ma'am, Colonel Hawkins asked to see you." "Right away." Sasha frowned. "What for?" Brooks shifted, avoiding her gaze. "He didn't say, ma'am, just that it's urgent." She studied him for a moment, searching his face for a clue. Brooks was a good officer, reliable, but he couldn't hide his nerves. Something was wrong. She set her coffee down, grabbed her cap, and followed him out. The walk to headquarters was short, but it felt longer than usual, every step echoing with the memory of all the other times she'd been summoned. Some good, some bad, all of them changing the course of her career. As they walked, Sasha caught fragments of conversation from passing soldiers. Normal banter, complaints about chow, whispers about upcoming assignments. Nothing out of place, but the tension in the air was real, and she felt eyes on her as she approached the command building. Inside, the lights were too bright, the air too cold. The secretary at the front desk barely met her gaze, waving her through with a mumbled, "Go right in, Major." Sasha squared her shoulders and stepped into Colonel Hawkins' office. He looked up from a folder, his expression unreadable. Beside him sat General Michael Wallace, a man whose presence was enough to put the whole room on edge. The third figure was a civilian, older, sharp suit, face set in a mask of disinterest. Sasha's gut twisted. Whatever this was, it wasn't routine. "Major Peterson," Hawkins began, voice clipped. "At ease." Sasha obeyed, standing with her hands behind her back, heart pounding just a little faster than she liked to admit. "I'll get right to it," he continued, sliding a folder across the desk. "These are your discharge papers, effective immediately." For a heartbeat, she didn't move, didn't breathe. The words didn't make sense, not after all these years, all this service. She forced herself to speak, voice steady even as her mind spun. "Sir, there must be some mistake. May I ask why?" General Wallace's eyes were cold. "This decision comes from above, Major. There will be no explanation at this time." The civilian finally turned, revealing sharp blue eyes and a thin-lipped smile. "Your clearance has been revoked. You are required to clear your quarters and leave Fort Liberty by 1800 hours. Sasha felt as if the floor had dropped out from beneath her. She looked from Hawkins to Wallace to the civilian, searching for a hint of humanity, a crack in the mask. "Is there a process for appeal? A review?" The civilian shook his head. "Not in cases of national security." Colonel Hawkins avoided her gaze, jaw tight with discomfort. "You have until 1800, Major." The silence stretched, heavy and unforgiving. Sasha's mind raced. Was it the report she flagged? Had she made the wrong enemy? Or was it something else entirely, something she couldn't even see coming? She snapped a salute, sharp and controlled. "Understood, sir." As she turned to leave, Hawkins' voice stopped her. "I'm sorry, Sasha." For the first time in years, she almost let the mask slip. Almost. But she didn't. She closed the door behind her and walked away, each step feeling heavier than the last. Out in the hallway, the world continued as normal. Phones ringing, printers humming, boots clattering across tile. But for Sasha Peterson, everything had changed in a single silent instant. And as she made her way back to her quarters, her mind already began to turn, sharp and relentless. They might have ended her service with a signature, but Sasha Peterson was not the kind of soldier who accepted defeat. Not without answers. Not without a fight. She looked down at the orders in her hand, fingers tight around the paper, and let herself feel the anger, just for a moment. Then she drew a breath, straightened her shoulders, and got to work. Whatever was coming next, she would face it head on, just as she always had. Sasha Peterson walked back to her quarters with her thoughts pounding louder than her boots. Every stride down the corridor felt exposed, as if every other soldier somehow knew she was a woman already half ghost, that the paper in her hand was a death sentence written in military bureaucracy. She barely noticed the cheerful "morning, ma'am" tossed her way by a young private, someone she'd mentored through his first months of service. He paused mid-step, frowning after her, sensing something off in her tight expression, but Sasha kept moving. She didn't trust herself to speak. Inside her quarters, the room seemed even smaller than before, closing in with the weight of her orders. Her eyes landed on the photograph of her old squad. A dozen grinning faces from a lifetime ago, when her uniform felt like armor and not a target. There had been setbacks before. The close calls, the missions gone sideways, the days when leadership made decisions she couldn't stomach. But this was different. This was erasure. No warning, no explanation. Just an official folder, and the expectation that she'd vanish like a file sent to the shredder. She dropped onto the edge of her bed, elbows on knees, staring at the discharge paperwork. The words were precise and cold, signed with a flourish by someone who probably never heard a shot fired. Sasha tried to focus on the facts, timing, details, any clue that might slip through the official language. Nothing made sense. Her recent reviews were exemplary. Her team trusted her judgment, and command always relied on her instincts when a crisis arose. The only blemish in recent weeks was the anomaly she'd flagged in a field report, the kind of discrepancy she was paid to notice. For a brief moment, hope flickered. Maybe this was a mistake, a glitch in the system. She should call someone. But who? No one outranked General Wallace, and the civilian, Monroe, according to his ID badge, was the kind of man who made rules rather than followed them. Her allies at Fort Liberty had power, but not the right kind. She knew how fast the machine could turn. Loyalty, once broken, was irreparable in these halls. Her phone buzzed on the desk. The urge to ignore it nearly won, but years of habit forced her hand. The caller ID flashed Lieutenant Adam Brooks. Sasha picked up, forcing her tone steady. "Ma'am, I just wanted to check on you," Brooks said quietly, his voice hushed, as if the walls themselves might be listening. "Thank you, Lieutenant. I'm fine," Sasha lied, glancing at the half-packed duffel bag beside her bed. There was a pause. "Ma'am, the word's out. Sergeant Turner and some of the team, they're asking questions. Everyone's saying it was sudden, unfair." Sasha felt a brief spark of warmth. Melissa Turner was as loyal as they came. An ironclad NCO who had Sasha's back, through everything from supply chain screw-ups to IED patrols. "Tell them not to worry," Sasha said. "I'll reach out if I can. Right now I need you and the team focused on the mission." Brooks hesitated. "Ma'am, I think this is wrong. If there's anything I can—" She cut him off, softening her voice. "Lieutenant, that's an order. Keep your head down, and thank you." He hung up, but his concern lingered like a ghost in the room. Sasha knew what came next. She'd seen it before. The rumors, the half-whispered accusations, the scramble for self-preservation as people distanced themselves from a fallen officer. She could already feel the air changing outside her door, the undercurrent of fear and suspicion. Packing her bag was mechanical. She stripped her rack of ribbons and medals, folding her uniform with precision. The medal box went in last, along with the faded squad photo. Her sidearm, turned in at the armory as per regulation, left her feeling vulnerable. She could feel the eyes of the base on her, even alone in her room. A knock sounded. Not the brisk, hesitant tap of Brooks, but a sharp, authoritative rap. Sasha squared her shoulders and opened the door. Sergeant Melissa Turner stood in the hall, eyes stormy, fists clenched at her sides. Turner was a rock, broad-shouldered, unshakable, with a reputation for taking no nonsense from anyone. She didn't salute. Instead, she stepped in and closed the door behind her. "Is it true?" Turner's voice was rough, angry. Sasha nodded, her jaw tight. "Effective immediately. Orders from above." Turner's hands flexed at her sides. "They won't tell us why. Just that you're out. Some of the guys are ready to make noise. You know that, right?" Sasha almost smiled, the corners of her mouth softening for the first time all morning. "That's the last thing I want. They'll only hurt themselves if they try." Turner shook her head. "You deserve better. After everything." "Stop." Sasha's tone was gentle but unyielding. "Don't do anything stupid, Mel. This isn't the fight we win." Turner exhaled, fury simmering in her eyes. "Promise you'll call if you need help. Anything. You say the word, and I'll bring the whole squad." Sasha placed a hand on her shoulder. "I know, and that means more than you think. But you need to keep your nose clean. Watch out for Brooks. The team needs you." Turner swallowed hard, nodding. "They're making a mistake. They usually do, until they need someone to clean it up." Sasha tried to sound wry, but the bitterness tasted real. They embraced, two soldiers with too much history between them for words to cover. Then Turner left, the door closing with a finality that made Sasha's gut ache. Minutes stretched into an hour as she methodically emptied drawers, boxed up her life, and double-checked every corner for something forgotten. Outside, voices echoed, orders barked, boots pounding, laughter carrying from the motor pool. Normalcy, Sasha thought, was sometimes the cruelest weapon. The moment came to turn in her keys. She made her way down the corridor, head high, passing familiar faces. Some avoided her gaze, others looked at her with naked confusion, even pity. A young specialist fumbled with her salute, uncertain what was still allowed. Sasha just nodded. She was determined not to show weakness. At the armory, the clerk avoided conversation, his usual friendly banter replaced by awkward silence as he logged her sidearm and handed her the receipt. Even here, she was an outsider now. As she turned away, she heard laughter from the hallway. Nothing to do with her, probably, but it felt different, like she was the punchline of a joke she didn't get to hear. Sasha quickened her pace, longing for the comfort of her empty room. Back in her quarters, her phone buzzed with a new message. Unknown number. She hesitated, then opened it. "Major Peterson. Pack light. Someone will be in touch." She stared at the words, a chill running down her spine. No signature, no clue. But whoever sent it knew her situation, maybe even more than she did. Instinct screamed at her not to reply. She deleted the message and smashed her phone's SIM card with the heel of her boot, breathing hard. She had no intention of being followed, not now. She finished her packing, hands moving faster as her mind spun through every possible scenario. Had she uncovered something she shouldn't have? Had a rival in intelligence finally found a way to push her out? Or was it simply the way the army always ended things? Quick, quiet, without a trace. The sunlight through her window was harsh as she slung the duffel bag over her shoulder. She stood in the doorway for a moment, looking back at the life she'd built within these four walls. The comfort, the routine, the camaraderie, all gone in a blink. Sasha closed the door softly behind her, her only regret that she wouldn't be here to see what happened next. The walk to the admin building was even more surreal. She passed Lieutenant Brooks in the courtyard, who tried to intercept her, but she shook her head just once, and he let her go. His shoulders sagged as he watched her pass. At the admin window, the clerk processed her paperwork in silence. Sasha signed her name where instructed, careful and precise, and waited as her access badge was clipped from her uniform. It felt like losing a limb, the final indignity. As she stepped outside, sunlight hit her face, and she felt a strange lightness. For a moment there was nothing left to do but breathe. She squared her shoulders, gripped the duffel bag tighter, and started down the path toward the base gates. With every step, she reminded herself that what they'd taken from her was just the uniform, not the person, not the purpose, not the resolve. Sasha Peterson had always been more than her rank, and if this was the Army's final word, she'd find her own way to answer. She paused, just before the road turned, and looked back over her shoulder one last time. The flag still flew, the engine still rumbled, the voices still rose and fell. Fort Liberty went on without her, but her story wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. The world felt different the moment Sasha stepped outside the admin building. Crisper, harder, every line and color more severe. She adjusted the weight of her duffel bag and tried to fall into the rhythm of marching, a tempo drilled into her over 2 decades. But something about walking away from everything she'd known made her steps feel foreign. It wasn't just her boots striking the pavement. It was the absence of purpose in every stride. Without orders, without a mission, what was left? She moved through the heart of Fort Liberty, watching the base come alive for the day, though it felt like she was already fading into the background. Young privates hustled to formation, officers barked commands, and supply trucks rumbled down the narrow lanes. It could have been any other morning, but today Sasha felt the way a shadow might. If it suddenly realized it no longer belonged to the object that cast it. People watched her, but no one spoke. Most looked away quickly, fearing even to acknowledge her. Others glanced over with confusion, as if searching her face for answers, wanting to ask but too afraid of what they'd hear. The rumor mill churned beneath the surface. Whispers followed her in the way only a soldier's disgrace could travel, swift and silent, passed from mouth to mouth in the chow line, at the water coolers, behind closed office doors. Sasha recognized the pattern. She'd seen it play out for others, never expected to become its subject. She caught sight of Sergeant Melissa Turner waiting near the barracks entrance, arms folded tight across her chest, jaw clenched in a stubborn line. Turner had that look, equal parts furious and helpless. She stepped forward as Sasha approached, her voice low, sharp with pain. "They're saying you were compromised, that you flagged something you weren't supposed to see." Sasha set her duffel down and met her friend's eyes. "I don't know what they're saying. I just know I've been told to disappear. Don't repeat this, Mel. It'll only get you in trouble." Turner's hands shook as she pressed them flat against her thighs. "This place is wrong. The way they're doing you, it isn't right. The others think so too. Brooks says half your team's ready to walk out and protest, and I'd go with them if you asked." Sasha shook her head. "I can't let you risk your careers. You have lives here, families, plans. They'd crush you and nothing would change." She tried to sound firm, but it came out tired. "Promise me you'll keep your head down. That's an order." For a second, Turner didn't answer. Then she forced a crooked smile. "You know I was never any good at following orders that don't make sense." Sasha laughed, a raw sound somewhere between relief and grief. "Just this once, please." Turner nodded, reluctantly. She handed Sasha a small envelope. "It's got my number, Brooks' number, and a couple of the old crew, in case you need anything. In case they try to make you vanish for real." Sasha's throat tightened as she tucked the envelope into her pocket. "Thank you. I'll be in touch if I can. Watch each other's backs, all right?" They hugged, fiercely, both of them clinging to the last shred of familiarity in a world suddenly changed. Turner was the last one to let go, her hands lingering on Sasha's shoulders, as if imprinting the moment into memory. Then she stepped away, her jaws set, eyes shining. "You better keep your head on straight, Major." Sasha hoisted her bag and nodded, moving on. Each step away from Turner felt like walking out of her own skin. Her quarters were already half-stripped when she arrived. Someone from admin had clearly been through. Her desk drawers left ajar, a few personal files missing, her laptop gone. She sorted what was left into piles, personal items to be mailed home, uniforms to be turned in, the rest discarded or abandoned. The act of sorting felt strangely peaceful, a final measure of control in a place that had always tried to take it from her. In the corner, her battered green duffel sat open, and Sasha filled it methodically. A spare pair of boots, the metal box, its contents rattling softly, the faded photo of her old squad, edges curled from years of handling. She let her hand linger there, brushing the faces. McAllister, Sanchez, Lee, Jennings, every one of them gone now except her. For a second she let herself remember that first tour. Sun rising over the wire, laughter after a night patrol, the feeling of belonging to something larger than herself. She slid the photo into an inner pocket, zipped the bag, and sat on the edge of the bed, letting her mind wander. Somewhere outside, a bugle sounded, signaling the start of formation. Sasha listened, recognizing every note, every pause, every unspoken expectation in that simple melody. She wondered if anyone would notice her absence tomorrow, or if her place would be filled before her scent faded from the room. The knock at her door was soft. She tensed, expecting MPs or another officer sent to hurry her along, but it was Lieutenant Brooks. He stepped inside, shutting the door behind him. "I just wanted to say goodbye," he said, "and to say I'm sorry. I looked up to you, ma'am. Still do." Sasha smiled, letting the warmth reach her eyes. "You'll do fine, Brooks. You always were a quick study. Don't let them shake you." He hesitated. "They're saying it was a security thing. But nobody believes it. Not anyone who knows you. I think someone's scared of what you found." Sasha shrugged, trying to make light of it. "Wouldn't be the first time someone tried to bury the truth. But if I learned anything, it's that secrets never stay buried forever." Brooks nodded, swallowing hard. "If you need anything, well, you know where to find me, I mean it." She patted his shoulder. "Keep your head down. Stay safe." He left as quietly as he'd come, and Sasha was alone again. She finished her packing, then stripped her bed, leaving the room as she'd found it so many years ago. Bare, impersonal, ready for the next soldier to move in and start their own story. The walk to the vehicle gate felt like a slow mammoth dream. She could feel the eyes on her, soldiers pausing in their routines to watch, conversations fading as she approached. There was no escort, no formality, just a steady, silent exodus. She passed the motor pool, where a pair of mechanics stopped wrenching on a Humvee to give her a thumbs up. She nodded, unable to trust her voice. At the checkpoint, a young MP checked her orders with shaking hands, unable to meet her gaze. Sasha signed the logbook, her name joining a long list of ghosts. The barrier lifted and she stepped through, leaving Fort Liberty behind. For the first time since sunrise, she let her shoulders sag, the weight of years pressing down all at once. The road beyond the gate stretched wide and empty, shimmering with early afternoon heat. Sasha paused, closing her eyes, letting the wind ruffle her hair. Every instinct screamed at her to fight, to turn back, demand answers, refuse to go quietly. But she'd seen too much, lost too much, to throw herself against a wall she couldn't break. Not yet. She started walking, her bag bouncing against her side. There was no plan, just movement, a desperate refusal to stand still. She passed the old memorial by the entrance, the one dedicated to the fallen of forgotten wars. For a moment she touched the cold granite, tracing the names carved deep, feeling the pulse of history echo in her bones. A car honked from the nearby road, a civilian oblivious to the storm raging behind her eyes. Sasha kept walking, each step taking her further from the only home she'd known for 2 decades. The sun was high now, casting sharp shadows across the ground. With every stride she felt something fall away. A layer of anger, a sliver of grief, a piece of the uniform she'd worn like a second skin. As she reached the first mile marker, Sasha glanced back. Fort Liberty shimmered in the distance, fences and barracks blending into the horizon. She squared her shoulders, turned away, and kept moving. Whatever waited ahead, she'd meet it on her own terms. She wasn't done, not by a long shot. If they wanted her gone, they'd have to do better than a signature and a silent goodbye. Sasha Peterson had been cast out, but she would not be erased. Sasha Peterson's steps slowed as the chain-link fence and weathered main gate of Fort Liberty came into sharp focus ahead. The sun hung high now, throwing a harsh light over everything, the kind that made nothing beautiful and nothing easy to hide. The world on the other side of the fence felt 1,000,000 miles away, civilian life, freedom, anonymity, and all that separated her from it was a last humiliating march past the men and women she'd spent her adulthood leading and protecting. She adjusted her grip on the duffel bag's strap, willing her hand to stop trembling. The stairs prickled at her back even before she passed the headquarters building, and as she drew closer, their silence thickened. She knew what this looked like. She had seen it herself back when she was just a new lieutenant, an officer with her head high and eyes locked straight ahead, flanked by MPs or worse, alone, carrying the weight of an unspoken sentence. Back then, she'd wondered what crime had been committed, what secret shame had surfaced, what mistake had finally shattered a once bright career. She never thought she'd be the one in the center of all those sideways glances and whispered suspicions. The guard at the main gate shifted his stance as she approached. Private Harris, barely old enough to rent a car, with a baby face and an overzealous salute. He didn't raise his hand now. Instead, he simply stared at the duffel bag and the discharge folder pressed tight under Sasha's arm. His lips parted like he wanted to say something, maybe an apology, maybe a question. But nothing came out. Sasha met his gaze, and in that moment, she saw the confusion and pain and fear reflected in his eyes. It was the same fear that had kept the other soldiers silent, the kind that warned them, "Don't get too close to the fallen," or "You might be next." The paperwork exchange was perfunctory, a formality performed in awkward silence. Harris scanned her orders twice, then again, as if searching for some line that would let him wave her through with an apology and a promise to fix whatever had gone wrong. Instead, he just nodded once, slow and heavy, and handed the papers back. "You're a good officer, ma'am," he managed, voice tight. Sasha hesitated, her own words stuck behind a wall of pride and anger. Finally, she said softly, "Thank you, Private. You keep your nose clean." She stepped beyond the threshold, her boots thudding on the blacktop as she left the only home she'd known for 20 years. For a moment the world outside felt too big, too bright, the air too thin. She stopped just past the gate, the engine of an idling Humvee rumbling somewhere behind her, and allowed herself a single, shuddering breath. The walk down the access road felt endless. A few cars passed. A battered sedan, a government SUV, an old minivan packed with a family and moving boxes. Nobody gave her a second glance. Sasha kept her head up, refusing to let her posture slump, refusing to give anyone, especially herself, the satisfaction of seeing her defeated. Her shadow stretched out ahead of her, long and solitary, and she wondered if this was how it always felt for those cast aside. Was this the price for a lifetime of service? Not a parade, not even a ceremony. Just a silent exile, witnessed by nobody who cared and nobody who dared protest. She reached the bus stop at the edge of the highway, just beyond the view of the main gate. It was little more than a splintered bench beneath a sun-bleached shelter, the metal warped and rusting from years of neglect. Sasha sat, setting her bag at her feet, and stared out across the road, watching the endless stream of vehicles. She wondered who else had waited here after being expelled. How many boots had scuffed the same concrete? How many stories had ended or begun on this unremarkable patch of ground? A verdict was given, only half of it. A familiar voice broke the silence. They really did it, huh? She looked up to see Sergeant Melissa Turner standing at the curb, hands in her pockets, eyes blazing with defiance and sadness. Turner hadn't been able to let her go after all. She hovered awkwardly, glancing both ways as if expecting MPs to appear from the trees. Sasha forced a smile. "I'm out, Mel. You shouldn't be here. If they see you—" Turner shrugged, dropping onto the bench beside her. "Let 'em. Someone needs to see this isn't right." The team's furious. Brooks almost decked Captain Franklin when he made a joke about cleaning house. Sasha felt a surge of fierce, protective affection. "Promise me you'll keep them in line. I mean it. Don't throw your careers away for me." Turner smirked, brushing a hand across her cheek. "We'd follow you through hell, Sasha. But I'll keep it quiet. Just know, we're watching." Sasha reached over and squeezed her friend's hand, both of them holding on a second longer than necessary. The silence between them was loaded, not with regret, but with gratitude. Finally, Turner stood, scanning the road. "You gonna call anyone? Family?" Sasha shook her head. "Not yet. I need to clear mine first. Figure out what comes next." Turner nodded, then walked away, melting back toward the base, every step a silent protest. The afternoon drifted on. The sun slipped behind thin clouds, shadows crawling over the ground. Sasha sat motionless, feeling the ache in her shoulders and spine, the exhaustion of a night spent waiting for something that never came. She replayed every meeting, every strange look from superiors, every redacted report and unexplained transfer. It all seemed to point to this day, though the reason remained just out of reach. After a long while, a dark blue sedan pulled up to the stop. The driver, a civilian in mirrored sunglasses and a ball cap, leaned out. "You, Sasha Peterson?" She tensed, every sense on high alert, but she nodded. "Who's asking?" He shrugged. "Got a message for you. Don't go far. Eyes are on you." Sasha's heart hammered, adrenaline flooding her system. She didn't recognize the man or the car, but the message was clear enough. Whoever wanted her gone hadn't finished the job. She watched the car drive away, dust swirling in its wake, then looked down at her hands. Still steady, still scarred, still hers. Another hour passed before the base alarms shattered the stillness. The wail of sirens, urgent and insistent, echoed from inside the fence line, followed by the distant thump-thump-thump of helicopter blades. Sasha stood, her bag already in hand, before she realized she'd moved. She turned toward the base, eyes searching the sky. The unmistakable silhouette of a Blackhawk appeared above the treetops, hovering just beyond the perimeter, its rotors churning up dust and loose debris from the old parade ground. Soldiers streamed toward the fence, confusion and fear painted on every face. Sasha's breath caught. She recognized the figure leaning out the side door, helmet off, hand waving her forward. Turner's voice rang in her mind. "We'd follow you through hell." For a split second, Sasha hesitated. This could be a trap. It could be another humiliation. Or it could be a lifeline thrown by someone who remembered her not as a liability, but as a leader. She tightened her grip on her bag, squared her shoulders, and started walking, first slowly, then faster, breaking into a jog as the Blackhawk descended lower, dust swirling around her boots. The soldiers at the fence parted, some saluting out of instinct, others simply staring as she approached the roaring machine. Sasha didn't look back. She didn't need to. With one last deep breath, she reached the helicopter. The familiar face of Chief Warrant Officer Jack Reynolds grinning at her from the cockpit. He reached out a hand and, over the roar of the rotors, shouted her name. Voice brimming with something like hope, or maybe just defiance. Sasha grabbed his hand, swung herself aboard, and in that moment, as the ground fell away beneath her and the whole base shrank to a distant smear in the window, she let herself feel it. Not shame, not regret, but a glimmer of the pride she thought she'd left behind at the gate. They could kick her off the base, strip her rank, and erase her records, but they couldn't erase who she was to the people who mattered. And as the Blackhawk banked hard toward the horizon, Sasha knew her story was nowhere near finished. The Blackhawk's roar thundered in Sasha's ears, a soundtrack that instantly triggered muscle memory from years past. Even after 2 decades of missions and briefings, that first surge of wind from the rotors, hot, chaotic, alive, still made her heart leap. She ducked instinctively as Chief Warrant Officer Jack Reynolds pulled her up. The old grin on his face nearly lost beneath the shadow of the cockpit. For a split second, they were simply 2 soldiers again, bonded by grit and history, the present chaos almost an afterthought. Jack barely gave her time to settle on the bench before the chopper jerked skyward, the world below shrinking fast. Sasha's duffel landed with a thud at her feet. She tightened her grip on the strap, knuckles whitening, as the Blackhawk banked sharply east, racing the edge of the tree line. Below, Fort Liberty's sprawl blurred, a patchwork of barracks, runways, and parade grounds flashing by through the swirling dust. Jack glanced over his shoulder, one hand steady on the stick, the other signaling for her to buckle in. "You always did know how to make an exit, Peterson." Sasha managed a tense smile, breath coming short. She looked past him to the co-pilot, another familiar face, Sergeant Diego Alvarez, who raised a gloved hand in greeting. The rest of the cabin was empty, except for the faint smell of aviation fuel and the constant, heavy thump of the rotors. Sasha leaned toward Jack, raising her voice above the mechanical din. "What's going on? Why are you here?" Jack's eyes flickered to the base, then back to her. "Orders from higher up, but not the kind you get in an office. Someone wanted you out, but someone else wants you alive, or at least not vanished." Sasha absorbed his words, a cold knot forming in her chest. She glanced out the window, watching Fort Liberty recede until it was nothing but dust and sunlight. The Blackhawk climbed higher, tracing a path away from the main roads, hugging the river to avoid detection. For a brief, surreal moment, Sasha felt herself floating between worlds, the one she'd just left behind, stripped of everything, and the one she was barreling toward with no idea what waited. She risked another look at Jack, studying the lines on his face. He looked older too, skin tanned by years of sun and wind, but his eyes were sharp as ever. "How much do you know?" she asked, voice tight. Jack shrugged, his grip steady. "Enough to know you pissed off the wrong people. Enough to know you flagged something in those reports and it scared somebody. You're not the only one they tried to bury, just the only one stubborn enough to stay in the fight this long." Sasha sat back, absorbing the churn of the world beneath her. It wasn't paranoia. There really were eyes on her, hands behind the curtain pulling strings she couldn't see. That message at the bus stop, the civilian car, the coldness in Wallace's and Monroe's faces, it all connected now. But the pattern was still just out of reach. Minutes blurred by, the terrain shifting from army green to rural sprawl. The Blackhawk dipped lower, following a bend in the river toward a clearing that looked, from above, like nothing more than an abandoned farmstead. Jack angled the bird down, skillful as ever, setting it into the tall grass with barely a jolt. "Out," Jack barked, businesslike now. "We don't have long. Follow me." Sasha grabbed her duffel, adrenaline spiking, and followed Jack and Alvarez as they slipped from the chopper. The noise faded quickly, swallowed by the rustle of wind through the trees and the distant calls of birds. Sasha's boots sank into the soft earth, each step a reminder that she was on the outside now. No orders, no clear allegiance, no backup except for the two men beside her. They hustled across the field, ducking through a sagging barn door. Inside, dust motes spun in the sunlight, the sharp smell of hay mixing with engine oil and sweat. Jack crouched by a crate and tossed her a battered canteen. "Drink. You look like you've been run over by a Humvee." Sasha took a long swallow, letting the water cool her throat, then lowered the canteen. "Jack, if you're in this deep, you need to tell me who I can trust. What's really happening?" He wiped his brow, glancing at Alvarez, who kept a wary eye on the door. "What you found in those field reports. Somebody high up wanted it to disappear. When you flagged it, it set off alarms in places you and I will never see. My orders came from an old friend in Army CID. Off the record, he said, if you value what's left of your career, you get Sasha out. Right now." He didn't say more, didn't have to. Sasha's mind raced. But why all the show? The alarms, the chopper at the fence. Someone wanted to make a statement. Jack gave her a hard look. Somebody wanted to see if you'd run, or if you'd fight. They're watching, Peterson. They want to know what you'll do next. A flash of memory hit Sasha. The civilian Monroe's cold blue eyes in that office. The absence of emotion, the way even Colonel Hawkins had seemed cornered. "I'm not going to disappear, Jack. They can strip my rank, they can send me packing, but they can't erase what I saw." Alvarez checked his watch, tension in every muscle. "We have to move, Chief. They'll be sweeping the perimeter soon." Jack nodded. He turned to Sasha, voice dropping low. "There's a safe house, north of here. Contact will meet you there. Someone who's been tracking these anomalies for a while. She knows how to stay off the radar. You trust her like you'd trust me. Understood?" Sasha nodded. She felt the tremor in her hands, but her voice was steady. "Understood. I'll do whatever it takes." Jack gripped her shoulder. "That's why you're still standing, Sasha. Just keep your head on straight." They hustled out the back, where an old Jeep waited, keys already in the ignition. Jack pressed the handle of a pistol into Sasha's palm, a gesture both reassuring and deeply sobering. The ride north was tense and silent. Fields rolled past, broken by lines of trees and the occasional farmhouse. Every mile farther from the base, Sasha felt the burden of shame lighten, replaced by the old surge of focus and purpose. She was on the run, yes, but she was running toward something now, not just away. As they neared the crossroads where the safe house waited, Jack slowed the Jeep and parked behind a thicket of pines. Alvarez hopped out to scout ahead. Jack looked at Sasha, his face grim but not defeated. "You get inside, you listen to what she says. Don't argue. She's smarter than both of us put together." Sasha managed a smile, adrenaline sharpening every sense. "You always said I had a problem with authority." Jack grinned. "Only when it counted." Alvarez waved them forward. They slipped along a narrow path to a weathered farmhouse, windows boarded, but a thin wisp of smoke curling from the chimney. Inside, the air was warm and smelled faintly of coffee and gun oil. A woman sat at the kitchen table, short hair shot with gray, hands folded around a mug. Her eyes found Sasha instantly. Direct, evaluating, not unkind. "So you're the one they tried to erase," she said. "Sit. We have a lot to talk about and not much time." Jack and Alvarez hovered at the door, watching the road, while Sasha dropped her bag and took a seat, heart thudding. For the first time since she'd been stripped of her rank, she let herself hope. Maybe, just maybe, there was a way out of this. A path through the shadows, lit by the loyalty of those who refused to let her vanish. The Blackhawk's echo faded in the sky, but its meaning lingered. She was not alone, not forgotten, and certainly not finished. Whatever storm was coming, Sasha Peterson was ready to meet it head-on. Sasha Peterson sat at the farmhouse table, her hands wrapped tight around a chipped ceramic mug, pulse thundering in her ears. The woman across from her, Evelyn Parker, if she'd heard Jack right, radiated calm authority, the kind that couldn't be faked. Her gray eyes flicked over Sasha, assessing, but her manner held none of the judgment or suspicion Sasha had come to expect. Instead, Evelyn gave her a slight nod, as if they'd already fought in the same foxhole and come out the other side. Jack and Alvarez hovered just inside the doorway, restless as guard dogs. Outside, the world was hushed. Only the wind in the pines and the distant hush of traffic on the old state highway. Sasha took a sip of coffee, letting the bitter heat anchor her to the present. Evelyn finally spoke, her voice soft but sharp as a scalpel. "You flagged a report about supply shipments moving through Liberty. Shipments that don't match any unit's manifest or logistics records. Someone high up is diverting gear, money, maybe even weapons, and using dead-end channels to cover their tracks. When you noticed, they decided you were a problem they needed to solve." Sasha tensed, the lines on her face deepening. "I saw those numbers 2 weeks ago. The paperwork was doctored, and there were signatures from officers who hadn't been stationed at Liberty in years. I wrote up a risk assessment and sent it through the usual chain. I didn't think I was the only one paying attention, but I never imagined it would come to this." Evelyn arched an eyebrow. "They wanted you gone quietly. That was the plan. But someone in CID flagged your name, and flagged your courage. That's why Jack got orders to pull you out. They didn't expect you to have friends who'd stick their necks out for you." Sasha looked at Jack and Alvarez. Jack gave a single nod. "Not many people left I'd do that for," he said. "But you're one." Evelyn slid a thick manila folder across the table. Sasha opened it, finding photos, maps, and a cascade of emails. Evidence gathered over months, some of it redacted, some raw. She flipped through, her mind racing to process it all. Satellite images showed supply trucks rolling out in the middle of the night, their markings blurred. Transaction records hinted at money funneled off base into shell companies and private accounts. "You're not alone," Evelyn said. "There are others, officers, analysts, a few stubborn civilians, quietly gathering proof. But we don't know who's at the top, who has enough power to erase a career with one order. That's where you come in, Sasha. You were inside their system longer than any of us. You know the players, the rhythms, the little tells that a stranger would miss." Sasha straightened, adrenaline replacing the old ache of loss. "You need someone who can spot what's real and what's misdirection. Someone who knows how to move without leaving footprints." Evelyn smiled, almost proud. "That's exactly what we need. The question is, are you willing? Because if you walk away now, we'll find another way, but it'll be harder, and it might cost more lives." Sasha didn't hesitate. "I'm in. They already took everything they could from me. They don't get to keep my silence, too." Jack let out a low, relieved laugh. Alvarez grinned and flashed her a thumbs up. Evelyn wasted no time. "First step, we'll need you to reach out to your old team, carefully. See who's willing to pass intel or keep eyes on base movements. And I want you to look at these logs, find any patterns we've missed." Sasha dug in, losing herself in the details, her old skills kicking in. She spotted timestamps that didn't fit, an officer's signature in 2 places at once. Codes that looked legit but were subtly altered. Every page, every anomaly was another piece in a puzzle she'd already begun assembling in her head. For hours, the farmhouse became a war room. Maps littered the table. Evelyn took calls from contacts, her end of the conversation always cryptic and brief. Jack monitored the radio, updating them on patrol movements and the chatter coming from Fort Liberty's comms. Alvarez ran background checks, scrubbing names through a database he swore was older than dirt, but more reliable than anything the government had paid for in the last decade. As dusk crept in, painting the windows gold and gray, Sasha sat back, rubbing her eyes. There's a window. Tonight, around 2300. Another shipment. They'll try to move it off base the same way as before, but there's a new driver, someone they haven't used. That's a weak point. Evelyn's gaze sharpened. Do you think you can intercept? Or at least get proof? Sasha nodded, the old resolve hardening in her chest. If I get close enough, I can get photos, maybe even audio. But I'll need a distraction. And I'll need a ride out in case things go south. Jack grinned, flexing his knuckles. I've got your back, same as always. And Alvarez is the best wheelman in 3 states. They ran through the plan, timing, escape routes, code words. Evelyn handed Sasha a burner phone, her number pre-programmed. This only calls me. Don't text. If anything feels wrong, pull back. We can't risk losing you, too. Sasha stuffed the phone in her pocket, her heart hammering. For the first time since she'd been walked out of Fort Liberty, she felt almost whole. Not restored, not exactly, but galvanized by the loyalty surrounding her. Just after nightfall, they moved out. Jack drove, Alvarez riding shotgun, Sasha in the back, scanning the radio for police or military chatter. They parked half a mile from the supply depot, hidden under a stand of pines. Sasha slipped out, low and silent, moving like the shadow she'd learned to become. The depot loomed, floodlights flickering at the fence, trucks idled, drivers milling in the gloom. Sasha blended in, using an old security badge she'd kept. Expired, but the guard at the far gate was more interested in his phone than in protocol. She made her way to the rear of the compound, snapping photos with a miniature camera, recording the plates, the faces, the paperwork passed from hand to hand. Then she heard it. A familiar voice, cold and clipped, the same one that had read her discharge, Monroe. He was there, in the flesh, giving orders. Sasha melted into the shadows, close enough to catch fragments. Make sure it's off the books. No questions, no witnesses. Peterson is gone. No more problems. Her blood ran cold, but her hands were steady as she kept recording. Monroe's voice was enough to tie him to the operation. It was the proof they needed, and she knew it. Suddenly a flashlight beam swept her way. Sasha ducked low, heart hammering, and crept along the fence until she reached the extraction point. Jack was waiting, engine running low, Alvarez watching the road. Sasha dove into the back seat just as shouts erupted behind her. Someone had found a broken piece of fence, maybe a boot print she'd left. Go, she hissed. Jack floored it, gravel spraying. Alvarez scanned the rear view. No tail yet, but they're looking. Sasha gripped her camera tight. I got what we needed. Monroe's on tape. They can't cover this up anymore. Jack whooped, relief and pride mingling in his voice. That's my girl. They didn't slow down until they were 10 miles out, safe among the rolling dark fields. Only then did Sasha let herself breathe. The evidence was secured, the network intact, and the truth, finally, within reach. As they rolled back to the farmhouse, Sasha leaned her head against the window, the fatigue and adrenaline crashing over her. For the first time in days, she felt something like hope. The shadows still pressed in, but she was no longer lost inside them, and with every mile, she knew they were closer to the reckoning that would set her free. The farmhouse was quiet when they returned, headlights sweeping across the gravel driveway, dew already forming in the cool pre-dawn air. Sasha pressed her camera to her chest, still feeling the phantom thrum of adrenaline through her veins. Alvarez parked behind the barn, engine ticking as it cooled, and for a long moment no one moved. It was that strange, hushed time just before sunrise when the world felt suspended, uncertain if it would tip into dawn or slip back into night. Jack slid out first, stretching stiff limbs and casting a look at Sasha that was equal parts pride and worry. "We did it," he said softly, not quite daring to believe it. Evelyn Parker was already waiting on the porch, silhouetted against the lamp's glow. Her eyes flicked to the camera in Sasha's hands, and something like relief crossed her features. Inside, the farmhouse transformed. The kitchen became a field office, laptops, burner phones, maps marked with fresh notes, the air humming with the quiet intensity of people who had waited too long for this moment. Sasha uploaded the photos and audio, Evelyn reviewing every file with the precision of a surgeon. They played Monroe's clipped voice over the speakers, listening to his orders. The language of criminal intent, of conspiracy, of arrogance, from someone who believed himself untouchable. Jack and Alvarez stood guard at the windows, but the world outside was still, dawn creeping across the fields, transforming darkness into silver bull promise. When Evelyn finally looked up, her smile was faint but triumphant. "This is it? This is enough?" Sasha let herself breathe. For days she had run on instinct, never stopping long enough to hope for a real victory. Now, surrounded by these stubborn allies, she felt the tension draining from her body, replaced by a fragile sense of peace. She allowed herself to imagine, for the first time since her abrupt discharge, a path back to purpose, to dignity, to something more than mere survival. Evelyn wasted no time. "We're sending the evidence out in 3 ways: military oversight, federal investigators, and the press. There's too much here for anyone to bury, no matter how deep the pockets." Sasha's voice was still hoarse from hours of tension. "What about the team back at Fort Liberty? Brooks, Turner, anyone who could be at risk?" Evelyn nodded, her tone fierce. "We'll protect them. The whistleblower statute will kick in, and now that this is public, it's not just our fight, it's on everyone's radar." Jack grinned, slapping Sasha's back with enough force to nearly knock the wind out of her. "Told you we'd see this through. I always said you were too stubborn to stay down." Sasha managed a laugh, a real one, rusty and unexpected. The farmhouse, battered and temporary as it was, felt like the safest place she'd ever known. The others smiled back, the room alive with hope, the first rays of sunlight warming their faces as if rewarding them for surviving the long, uncertain night. They worked through the morning, sending files and statements, checking and double-checking every fact, every timestamp, every detail. Evelyn's network moved fast. Trusted journalists responded with shock and gratitude. Military legal officers called for immediate review, and federal agents signaled that they were mobilizing to secure the implicated facilities. The operation moved from secret to public in a matter of hours. It wasn't long before the phones began to ring with frantic urgency. The first call came from an Army investigator who'd been stonewalled by Monroe's office more than once. Now he was armed with names, dates, and irrefutable evidence. The second was a senior official from the Pentagon, promising swift action and accountability, and hinting that a few of Monroe's allies were already scrambling to save themselves. News broke before noon. Major networks picked up the story, broadcasting the plot across the country. Fraud, illegal arms diversion, corruption traced all the way to a few untouchable figures who had, until now, operated in the dark. Sasha watched the headlines roll in, numb with relief and disbelief. She saw Turner's name quoted as a reliable source, Brooks listed among those who refused to be silenced. Even Colonel Hawkins released a statement, his clipped words expressing deep regret and unwavering respect for Major Peterson's integrity. The world shifted on its axis. At Fort Liberty, the mood turned from suspicion and rumor to vindication and pride. Soldiers gathered in the mess hall to watch the news, to cheer each new revelation, to argue over what should happen next. A few called Sasha directly, their voices shaking with emotion. "You did it, ma'am," Brooks said over the line, his relief palpable. "You brought the truth home." Turner added, "They tried to erase you. Now everyone knows who the real hero is." Sasha found herself blinking back tears she hadn't let fall for years. Not even on the days she lost friends, not even in the darkest hours overseas. It wasn't the recognition or the media attention. It was knowing she'd been believed, that her refusal to give in or back down had finally meant something. Evelyn pressed her shoulder gently. "They're offering you your commission back, full rank. Better, if you want it." Sasha sat in silence, the weight of the offer settling around her. She looked at Jack, at Alvarez, at Evelyn, at the circle of fighters who'd never let her stand alone. "I always served because I believed in the people beside me," she said quietly. "That's all I ever wanted. To do what's right. To know I wasn't alone." Jack grinned, raising a mug in mock salute. "You've got a whole damn army behind you now, Sasha. Not bad for someone they tried to write off as a mistake." For the first time since her exile, Sasha allowed herself to hope for more than just survival. She saw possibilities, working with oversight, training the next generation of officers, building something better from the ashes of what had been broken. She knew the scars wouldn't fade overnight. She knew there were still battles ahead. But this time she would face them on her own terms. Never again in silence. Never again in the shadows. That afternoon, as the sun poured gold across the fields, Sasha stepped outside. The air was sweet, laced with the scent of pine and distant honeysuckle. Birds flitted along the fence line, and the hum of life was everywhere, insistent and unbroken. Jack and Alvarez followed her out, quiet now, their presence grounding and real. Evelyn joined them, folding her arms and studying the horizon with a small, satisfied smile. Sasha closed her eyes, drawing in a long breath. The farmhouse, old, battered, imperfect, felt like a homecoming, not because of its walls, but because of the hearts gathered inside. She had been cast out, erased, marked for silence, but she had found her way back through loyalty, courage, and truth. When she opened her eyes again, the world felt brighter. The storm had passed. Vindication, hard-won and beautiful, was hers, and she would never, ever walk alone again.